The summer I turned 15, my parents decided it would be good for me to get out of the city, breathe some fresh air, and make some new friends. That's how I ended up at Camp Redwood, known for its sprawling landscapes and legendary campfires. I didn't know it then, but I was about to spend the most haunting summer of my life there. The first day was all laughter and games. A bunch of us campers were divided into groups, and I was put with a bunch of guys around my age. There was Jake, Tom, Alex, and me. We bonded quickly, especially over our shared discomfort with our counselor, Mr. Darrow. Mr. Darrow was a tall man with unsettling pale blue eyes and a constant, eerie smile. He had been working at Camp Redwood for years, as he liked to tell us in his low, slow voice. I couldn't tell if that's how he really talked or if he forced himself to talk like that. There was something off about him that I couldn't put my finger on at first. He would often say things that make no sense, like warning us about the whispers in the woods at night and how we should never listen to them. Stay in your beds, boys, no matter what you hear, Mr. Darrow would say as he patrolled our cabin before lights out. None of us took him seriously at first. We figured it was just his way of spooking us, a camp counselor's trick. But as the days went on, things started to get weirder. One night, Jake decided we should see if there was any truth to Mr. Darrow's story about the whispers. We waited until Mr. Darrow finished his usual rounds and then snuck out of our cabin. The night was eerily silent as we tiptoed through the woods, the beams of our flashlights cutting through the darkness. We hadn't gone far when we heard it. A low, murmury whisper, like voices overlapping. It seemed to come from all around us, unintelligible and chilling. Scared but curious, we moved closer to the sound until we were standing in a small clearing. The voices became clearer there, whispering things that made no sense. We stood there, frozen, unable to move away from the sounds that seemed to ensnare us. Suddenly, a hand clamped down on my shoulder and I screamed, spinning around. It was Mr. Darrow, his pale eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "I told you not to listen," he hissed, his grip tightening. "Now you know why." He marched us back to camp, lecturing us about rules and safety, but his usual eerie smile was gone. Instead, his lips were a thin line, and his eyes kept darting to the woods as if he expected something to burst through the trees. The next few days were tense. We didn't talk much about what happened, and we certainly didn't try to sneak out again. But the atmosphere in the camp had changed. Shadows seemed darker, the noise louder, and our once friendly counselor watched us with the intensity that made my skin crawl. Things came to a head one evening when Tom went missing. He wasn't in his bed during roll call, and a quick search confirmed he wasn't anywhere in the cabin. Mr. Darrow organized search parties, his face more serious than I had ever seen it. We found Tom 2 hours later, wandering near the lake, his eyes wide and unseeing, mumbling to himself about voices and shadows. He didn't seem to recognize any of us, and when Mr. Darrow approached him, Tom screamed like he was in deep terror. They had to send Tom home after that. He was too shaken to stay, and honestly, so were the rest of us. But our parents had sent us here for the whole summer, and there was no easy way to contact them and ask to be picked up early. After Tom's departure, Mr. Darrow became more paranoid and more strange. He wouldn't let us out of his sight, and at night, he would lock our cabin from the outside, trapping us inside until morning. The whispers didn't stop either. If anything, they grew louder, more insistent. I lay awake at night, listening to them call my name, tempting me to step into the woods and discover their secrets. One night, unable to bear it any longer, I confronted Mr. Darrow. I found him outside the cabin, staring into the woods. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. "What's out there?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with a fear I hadn't seen before. "It's not me you should be afraid of, Chris. It's what lives in the woods. They've been here longer than the camp, longer than any of us. I was trying to protect you boys." I didn't sleep at all that night. The whispers seemed almost soothing compared to the horror I saw in Mr. Darrow's eyes. The summer couldn't end fast enough. When our parents finally came to pick us up, I was the first in line to leave, vowing to never return to Camp Redwood. Years later, I still hear them sometimes when it's quiet and the wind is just right. I lied to myself that it's just my imagination, but I knew it wasn't. Mr. Darrow never returned to Camp Redwood after that summer as well, from what I heard. The camp itself was closed down a few years later, rumors of hauntings and strange occurrences finally reaching the ears of the public. I'm not sure what really happened to Tom. I tried to look him up through social media but wasn't able to find anything. I just hope whatever he saw that night, that he is now alright. Summer camp was supposed to be a break from the everyday, a time for adventures and making memories, but for my best friend Lucy and me, it became something else entirely, a mystery that would haunt our small town for years. It was the summer of '95, and Lucy and I were thrilled to be back at Camp Meadow Creek, nestled deep in the woods of northern Maine. We had been counting down the days since the end of the last school year, eager to reunite with camp friends, swim in the lake, and escape the watchful eyes of our parents. The first few days were a blur of activities, from canoeing to archery and everything in between. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and the crackling of campfires. It felt like paradise, a place untouched by the worries of the world. But that feeling didn't last. It happened on the fifth night of camp. Lucy and I were assigned to a cabin on the edge of the campgrounds, a little further from the lake than the others. We didn't mind. It felt like we had our own private retreat. That night, after a long day of hiking, we were exhausted. The camp had organized a nighttime scavenger hunt, but Lucy and I decided to skip it and go to bed early. We were fast asleep by the time the other campers left, the sounds of the excitement fading into the distance. Sometime during the night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. Groggy and half asleep, I assumed it was Lucy talking in her sleep, a habit she had when she was particularly tired. I mumbled for her to be quiet and rolled over. When I woke up again, it was morning and the cabin was silent. The other bed was neatly made and Lucy's bag was gone. I figured she had woken up early and gone to meet the others for breakfast. I dressed quickly and headed to the dining hall, expecting to find her there, but she wasn't. I checked the bathrooms, the waterfront, the archery range, everywhere. Lucy was nowhere to be found. Panic began to set in. I approached one of the counselors, a college kid named Dan, and asked if he had seen Lucy. His face clouded with concern, and he promised to check with the other counselors. Within an hour, the entire camp was on high alert. The counselors had organized search parties, combing through the woods and calling her name. The local sheriff was called in, and the carefree atmosphere of the camp was shattered by the sound of sirens and the sight of police dogs. As the day dragged on with no sign of Lucy, I felt a sense of dread. The sheriff gathered all the campers in the dining hall and asked us repeatedly if we had seen anything unusual, if Lucy had said anything about wanting to leave, or if anyone unknown had been seen around the campgrounds. Everyone was questioned, their belongings searched, but there was nothing, no clues, no leads, no Lucy. The search lasted for days, then weeks. The camp was closed and we were all sent home. The summer cut tragically short. The story made the local news, reporters descending on our small town to cover the disappearance of a young girl at a summer camp. Months passed with no word. The case grew cold, and life slowly began to return to normal, or as normal as it could without Lucy. Flyers with her face was plastered on every lamppost and at every local store, the words "missing" in bold, haunting everyone who knew her. Years went by, and the mystery of Lucy's disappearance remained just that, a mystery. It hung over the town like a dark cloud, a story retold in hushed tones. Then, on the 10th anniversary of her disappearance, a hiker found a backpack in the woods near the camp. It was worn and faded, but unmistakably Lucy's. Inside was a water bottle, a rusted flashlight, and a diary. The diary she had been keeping that summer. The diary was water damaged, but most of its pages illegible. But on one of the last readable pages, Lucy had written about hearing strange noises outside our cabin the night she disappeared. She had decided to investigate, thinking it might be a lost camper or a counselor needing help. That was the last entry. The discovery of the diary reopened the case, but no leads emerged. The woods were searched again, but no further evidence was found. Lucy remained missing, her fate unknown. To this day, the shadows of that summer hang heavy in my heart. Every year, I return to the edge of the woods where Camp Meadow Creek once stood, now overgrown and forgotten. I stand there and remember my friend, hoping for answers that never come. The loss of Lucy changed our town, and especially me, forever. You always hear stories about how small towns are safe from crime and that because everyone knew each other, nothing bad could happen, but it does. I know most likely Lucy is no longer here, but I just hope that whatever happened to her, it was quick and that she is now in peace. I was 14, the summer everything changed at Camp Clearwater. I'd been coming to this camp for the past 2 summers, and it was always the highlight of my year. Friends, campfires, swimming in the lake, what more could a kid want? But my third summer there, my friends and I found something in the woods that turned our fun vacation into a nightmare. It was the second week of camp, and my friends and I were on one of our usual hikes through the forest. I was with my best friends, Tommy, Sarah, and Mike. We were pretending to be explorers, hacking through the underbrush with sticks we fashioned into makeshift machetes. Tommy was leading the way when he tripped over something sticking out of the ground. We all laughed at first, thinking Tommy was just being clumsy, but then we saw what he had tripped on. It wasn't a foot or a rock, it was a bone. Mike picked it up and turned it over in his hands. "Looks like a deer bone or something," he said, trying to sound sure. Sarah took it from him and examined it closer. "This isn't a deer bone, Mike. It's too big. And look here." She pointed at something on the bone. "These look like tool marks." We all gathered around, suddenly silent, the gravity of our discovery settling over us. We looked at each other, the same thought crossing all our minds. This could be a human bone. "We should tell someone," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Who? And say what? We found a bone?" Tommy scoffed. "We need more to show or they'll think we're just messing around." He was right. The counselors were cool, but not always quick to take us seriously. We decided to look around a bit more, just in case there was anything else. That decision would lead us down a path none of us were prepared for. We found out, searching the area where the bone was found. It didn't take long before Sarah called us over. She was standing by a shallow pit, her face pale. "Look," she said quietly. In the pit, half covered by leaves and dirt, were more bones. Human bones. Its skull stared up at us with empty eye sockets that seemed to see right through us. The jokes and laughter from earlier had vanished. We were standing in a grave. "We need to go to the counselors now," Tommy said. We all nodded, suddenly eager to be away from this creepy place. We marked the spot as best we could and hurried back to camp. The counselors listened to our story with growing seriousness and immediately called the police. The next few hours were a blur of police officers, questions, and our parents showing up. The camp was put on lockdown. No one could enter or leave until the police had cleared the area. They told us the bones were indeed human. They had been buried there for a long time, possibly decades. The camp had never seen anything like this, and everyone was shocked. We spent a lot of time with the police over the next couple of days, showing them where we found the bones and giving statements. It felt like something out of a movie, but not one I'd ever wanted to be in. The investigation found that the bones belonged to a missing person from the 1970s. The police suspected foul play, but after so many years, clues were scarce and surely there was no way of finding out who was the bad person that did this. Camp Clearwater didn't feel the same after that. The days seemed longer, the nights darker. We tried to engage in activities, to meet with our friends, to swim in the lake, but the joy was overshadowed by the mystery and the whispers about what had been found. My parents offered to take me home, but I chose to stay. I felt like leaving would mean letting whatever secrets were buried in those woods win. I needed to stay, to face the fear and not run from it. Plus, I couldn't leave my friends behind. We needed each other. By the time camp ended, no arrests had been made. The mystery remained just that, a mystery. We all went home, but our friendships felt different. We were no longer just camp friends. We were the kids who had found the bones at Camp Clearwater. Years have passed and we all grown up, moved to different places, and followed our own paths. But every summer, around the time when we found those bones, I get a message from Tommy, Sarah, or Mike. We reminisce, sometimes meet up, and remember the summer that changed our lives. We never did find out who the bones belonged to or why they were there. That part of Camp Clearwater's history remains unknown to this day. That summer, we lost a piece of our youth, but we gained a story that we would carry with